Welcome to Nonsense Season 3, Episode 51, our big story and our second show of the week. I'm Jeff Parker.
I'm Skittle.
This time we're looking at The Button That Rules Them All, a love letter to the clicker, up next.
Oh, man, the hardest part of the button is finding it.
No, just no.
Well, that's what I heard.
Don't touch that dial. A history of the remote control. Let's go.
But Just
stop.
Just thwart my efforts to get us canceled. I need like a little Thomas guide, just like a little human anatomy Thomas guide. Oh, C3. Oh, there. Now I got it.
The television remote. It's a ubiquitous, often lost object that holds the power to command our entertainment. Yet this unassuming plastic device has a history as bizarre and inventive as any science fiction plot. For decades, the simple act of changing a channel was a tedious chore, forcing viewers to rise from their armchairs and physically turn a knob. My parents had children for this purpose. Then came the pioneers, eccentric engineers who dreamed of a world where command could be issued from the comfort of the couch, as if they were Captain Kirk himself. Their journey began not with sleek infrared beams, but with a Rube Goldberg-like contraption of wires, a flashlight-wielding ray gun, and a mechanical clicker that used ultrasonic sound waves to do its bidding.
Magic.
This is a story of how an object we barely notice, and in my house can rarely find, transformed our relationship with television, one channel at a time. Daniel Engberger did a brilliant story related to this in Slate, and I have to steal a paragraph from him about his brother explaining how to use his TV. Quote, just make sure you power up the cable with the gray remote and then flip on the set with that skinny black one. Otherwise, you'll screw it up. You can change the channels with the silver and use the gray again for volume, but remember, whatever happens, don't you dare press any of the buttons on this little gray one. For the love of God, just leave this little gray one alone.
So true.
I'll put a link in the notes to his story. Let's step way back in time. What did we control with the very first remote?
Bombs.
Yeah.
The answer is bombs. Believe it or not.
Bomb-laden boats.
Yeah.
We didn't have sophisticated delivery systems. Did we load up boats full of bombs? And
Well, you got to go way back.
Yeah.
You're like in the latter half of the 19th century.
Okay.
We're not talking about autonomous land. We're long before that.
Yeah.
We had this idea, I'm going to say need, for unmanned vehicles, mostly military torpedoes, because that is not a job you want.
Right.
You don't want to be the guy that's got a pilot torpedo. It doesn't end well. Not a lot of guys earn their stripes in that.
No.
This includes a wired version by the German engineer Werner von Siemens, who you may remember was the guy that started Siemens Electronics that we still have today.
Of course.
So he came up with this in like 1870. And then there was a radio-controlled one by the British engineer Ernest Wilson and C.J. Evans.
Okay.
So I think C.J. should have gotten more of the credit, personally. That was in 1897. And then we had a prototype of one by good old Nikola Tesla. He demonstrated his in New York in 1898. This is like that last half of the 1800s is when you had folks, we believe independently, trying to figure out how to remote control stuff, mainly bombs and weapons of war.
Tell me about Tesla's teleautomation. What exactly was he showing off?
So this was around 1898. He demonstrated a radio-controlled boat, which he called teleautomation, at the electrical exhibition in Madison Square Garden in New York City. It was groundbreaking public display of wireless remote control. Remember, at this time, we didn't have any of this. There wasn't we weren't using radio frequencies to do anything.
We were barely using electricity to do things at this point.
That's true. He ended up getting a patent for his invention. It's titled The Methods of and Apparatus for Controlling Mechanism of Moving Vessels or Vehicles.
Rolls right off the tongue.
It rolls right off the tongue. That was clearly the marketing department didn't have their say in that patent name. The boat was about 4 feet long.
Yeah.
And it was powered by internal batteries.
Sure.
The remote control, or control box as he called it, would send radio signals to an antenna on the boat. Inside the boat, he had a device called a coherer that would become conductive when it received these radio pulses.
Sure.
And it would activate electric motors to control the propeller and rudder. Again, by today's standards, you go, well, that's simple.
Sounds so pedestrian. You can go buy this for $19.95.
Yeah, right? Not even $19.95.
Yeah.
It's like $1.95 on Amazon. But it was a complete spectacle at the time. He controlled the boat's movements, and then to add to the theatrics, he even had the boat respond to questions. I'm putting this in quotes in the air, folks.
Yeah, sure.
From the audience, such as, what is the cube root of 64?
I love it.
And then it would flash its lights a certain number of times.
Like a horse tapping its hoof to
basically
show you it can do math.
You would think if there was like a modern version of this Tesla teleautomation, and you were to ask it what's the cube root of 64, it would either reply with, I'm sorry, I can't help you with that, which is basically what my phone does all the time.
Yeah.
Or it would just immediately crash into the nearest buoy. Because that's what I would think of as any sort of automated Tesla.
With no buoy, the boat would just sink.
Exactly. Just segmentation fault.
Why did the public find this so engaging? I mean, it's in hindsight, yes, I get it if you've never seen this before.
But nobody knew, like, radio radio waves were a very little understood concept. So the people who witnessed the demonstration were amazed that the boat was, somehow magically controlled. They thought it was like telepathy or a trained monkey hidden inside. Like that's all they could put in what they knew into it.
Yes, that's easier to ascribe it to.
Well, then, yeah.
Sure, it's black magic. Of course it's black magic.
Well, of course he's got a monkey that's trained that just knows what a cube root of 64 is, which, by the way, if you've got a monkey that can do cube roots, I think that's pretty interesting, but that's, neither near nor there. Tesla envisioned broader applications, right? The public thought this was sort of a novelty, but he thought that you could do these, remotely controlled torpedoes, other military vehicles. The U.S. military at the time showed little interest in this, but his invention really laid the foundation for modern remote control tech, including unmanned vehicles and ultimately what we today call the Internet of Things.
So what came after that?
1903, so now well into the 20th century by a whopping 3 years, this Spanish engineer, Leonardo Torres Quevedo, he introduced a radio-based control system called the Telencano, which really looks like Plinko when I look at it. He introduced it at the Paris Academy of Sciences, and he hoped to use it to control a dirigible of his own design. Unlike these previous sort of on-off techniques, Telencano was able to execute a finite but not limited set of different mechanical actions using a single communication channel, which was kind of interesting.
Sure.
So from 1904 to 1906, he conducted testing. He ended up using a ground vehicle. I assume it was just easier, like a 3-wheeled land vehicle. And he got up to about 30 meters away in testing, and then ultimately guided a manned electrical powered boat, which demonstrated a standoff range of about 2 kilometers.
That's great.
Which is pretty impressive.
Yeah, that's amazing.
You and I both know line of sight is really what matters here. Boats make that a lot easier because there's not a lot of stuff floating in the water to get in your way.
Right.
You're kind of seeing, like, just to set timing here, the first remote controlled model airplane didn't fly until 1930. So this is a good 25 years before that.
Wow.
Until we sort of saw that come. Ultimately, one of the results of this was the German Wasserfall missile, which they used during the Second World War, which was effectively had some modicum of remote controls in it.
How much remote control? Could it go forward, backwards? Could it change course?
No, I think you just had like control surface adjustments. You could change the attitude or the angle of some of the control surfaces so that as it's moving through the air, you could change its direction, I think. The V2s, if I understand it correctly, had none of that. They just lit them off and they were like, well, it's going to land where it's going to land.
Yeah.
And they just barraged the UK with that. But I think that was also a lot simpler to make and less expensive, so they can make more of them.
And fairly effective.
Super effective.
I remember as a kid going to England, still seeing some bombed out buildings.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, again, if I understand it correctly, their intent is to leave those there as a remembrance of what they went through, which I think is kind of brilliant.
Okay. What about the first remote controls that weren't for vehicles? What about ones that were even maybe for consumers?
So that title goes to Philco's Mystery Control. That's what they called it.
I love the name.
Such a great name. Introduced in 1939, this was a significant milestone in the history of remote control technology. It was a battery-operated, low-frequency radio transmitter, and it was the first wireless remote controller for a consumer electronics device.
I am naming my remote drawer in front of my TV the Mystery Control.
Mystery Control box?
Yeah.
I love it.
Some of these are going to control some things you want. Many of them won't.
And you're never going to know. That's the best part. Every one, it's like just playing the lottery.
Sure.
Which button you mash.
You have no idea which ones of these have dead batteries.
As a nerd, it's interesting to note that the Mystery Control, right? Philco's Mystery Control from 1939 used a pulse count modulation. So technically, it was the first digital wireless remote control.
Yeah.
The first remote control for a consumer device also was the first digital one. It just turns out it's a lot easier.
It makes it really easy if you just count the clicks and then, you do the thing.
So unlike the wired remotes that were available for some radios at the time, the Mystery Control was completely wireless. It was battery operated. It allowed users to control their radios from anywhere in their house.
Yeah.
Kind of cool.
Including from the next room.
Yeah, exactly. Or the next house.
Right.
Yeah, that was actually a real problem. It was like this bulky wooden box, sort of like a telephone rotary dial sort of look on it. And then you could select one of 8 preset stations, adjust the volume, turn the radio off. It did this via RF, via radio frequencies, and it would put these pulses on a frequency just below the standard AM broadcast band. The pulses were picked up by a special receiver within the Philco radio. The device was marketed as a miracle and was a huge sensation.
It's a cool device. I mean, for its time, that's amazing.
I mean, if your neighbor can't do this, they have to get up to go change the radio, and you can just sit on your couch and do it. That's a pretty big deal.
Sure.
The name Mystery Control came from the fact that it was not connected to the radio by any wire. So it was just like a mystery to the public, which I thought was really awesome. They put that on the brand.
And you know for a fact that they weren't using tiny, tiny monkeys.
No, nobody ever actually opened one up.
Okay.
So it was sort of like Schrodinger's monkey box.
Besides the obvious, what Mystery Control problems were there?
Well, you mentioned it earlier, the fact you could control your neighbors, right? Because it's RF, so it's going to go through walls.
Sure.
Philco had a solution for this. They would send out a technician to adjust the frequency of the receiver and the remote.
That's got to be practically free.
Yes. By today's standards, I would call a non-scalable solution because every time, and like, think about the opportunity opportunity to troll on this. You can just go buy a new radio to screw with your neighbors.
Sure.
These are the emergent problems you have with technology. Because the mystery control was this top-of-the-line luxury item, it was priced at the equivalent of thousands of dollars in today's money.
Well, yeah, it came with an engineer to come to your house.
I know, to tune it. Well, it was a short-lived product, but it paved the way for future wireless remote control technology.
Sure.
Once you ring the bell of remote controls, you're not going to unring it. Like, people are going to want this expectation. So the Philcoast kind of started it all for us.
So radios before TVs makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
When did we get the first TV remote control?
So you got the mystery control in like 39. You saw the first TV remote control around 1950.
And did it just mute commercials?
So it's funny you mentioned that. That was the inspiration for this, was to mute commercials. It was really just people angry over adverts, including the guy who started Zenith himself.
I would think.
Yeah. They sold sets and they didn't love this idea of there being these commercials. It interrupted the programming that they wanted to see.
Yeah.
The first TV remote control, which was called, and I'm not making this up, the Lazy Bones.
Yeah.
Again, does what it says on the tin. Developed in 1950 by Zenith Radio Corporation. Now, by the way, this is owned by LG Electronics. I didn't know that brand was still around in some form.
I've held a Lazy Bones in my hand.
Have you really? Oh, I don't
Yes.
know if I've ever seen one. It was wired, right? So
Yes.
it was referred to as the greatest aid to relaxation and comfort that's ever happened to television.
And it was.
Well, yeah, compared to the alternative of getting up, as you mentioned, in the open and going and having to turn the knobs yourself. This thing was bulky. It was corded. It had this sort of long, thick cable, but it allowed viewers to change the channel or turn the TV on and off without getting up from the couch. It had two simple buttons, one for changing the channel and the other for controlling the volume. That's it.
Yeah.
Pushing the button would send a signal through the wire to a motor in the TV that would then mechanically turn the channel dial.
And it would go click-clunk.
Exactly.
It was not quiet.
So it was a commercial success, but its biggest flaw was that long cord. Consumers found it to be unsightly. It was a trip hazard.
Yeah.
It was sort of just a general nuisance in the living room. And that led Zenith to quickly begin development on a wireless solution.
Right.
So that Lazy Bones to me was that next step after.
was a gap filler.
Yeah, but a successful one, right? And it proved that consumers were willing to pay a premium for the convenience of a remote control. So you sort of got some market validation that folks were willing to spend some money on this.
So what came after the Lazy Bones?
Commander Eugene F. McDonald Jr. This was Zenith's late founder and president.
Yeah.
He really believed that TV viewers would not tolerate commercials and was convinced that sooner or later commercial television would collapse.
Not the way it went.
Not the way it went, right? So he was developing and promoting the concept of commercial-free subscription television. He yearned for a better way to simply mute the sound of commercials. It sounds like that's really all he wanted. He didn't really care about anything else. He just wanted to mute the sound of commercials.
If you sell TVs, you don't really care.
You don't care.
If the broadcasters don't get paid for their commercials.
Not your problem. Your problem is selling TVs.
Right.
So the Lazy Bone limitations spurred the innovation, especially through McDonald's urging, that led to the first wireless TV remotes. And this is where we get into Zenith's Flash-Matic in 1955. This was an engineer named Eugene Polly at Zenith who developed the first wireless remote controller for a TV. It was a huge step forward beyond the wired, sort of clumsy Lazy Bones that we just talked about. Yeah. It used a directional beam of light, sort of similar to like a flashlight or what, then we may have called in sci-fi a ray gun to operate the TV. The TV had 4 photocells on it, one in each corner of the screen.
Sure.
And the remote had a single button, just one button to control the TV. You just had to aim the light beam at one of those 4 photocells. Super convenient.
This was not infrared light. This was just complete visible spectrum,
just
like a flashlight.
Yes.
Like if the sun accidentally beamed down and hit your television at just the wrong place, all of a sudden the channel would change.
Well, if by just the wrong place, you mean the front of the television, then yes.
Yes.
Yeah. It didn't have to like shine into some magic angle only on April 23rd.
No, of course.
When the sun was at some special point in the sky.
There's no Indiana Jones staff of Ra.
No.
The light has to hit at just the right time.
Because, again, they had a photocell in each 4 corners. So if you aimed at the top right, you would change the channel up. Top left would change the channel down. Bottom right would turn the sound and picture on or off. Yeah. And the bottom left would mute the sound. That was it. McDonald got his way. And you also had another issue, which was the remote, the actual remote itself, you needed to have line of sight to the television. Yeah. So if like one of your kids was sitting in front of you, the light wouldn't get through their thick dome to get to the TV.
Conveniently, to watch the TV, you needed to have line of sight. So those two things kind of work together.
You would hope. But I mean, when you had one TV that was like 18 inches diagonal and you got a kid with a giant melon sitting in front of it, you're not going to see part of it. Like, I get it.
Yeah, that's true.
Also, it was not cheap. Yeah. It added $100 onto the price of a television set. At the time, you could buy a car car for about $600.
Yeah.
So would you like a car, or for 1/6 of a car, you can have a remote?
I'd like 6 remotes.
Yeah, exactly. Despite its flaws, the Flash-Matic was a popular product, and it proved the demand for a wireless remote. But its unreliability led Zenith to quickly develop a new and more robust solution.
Yeah.
So they only had the Flash-Matic in production for about a year before it was replaced.
The Flash-Matic was replaced by the clicker?
Yeah. Commander McDonald loved the concepts proven by the Flash-Matic, and he directed his engineers to explore other technologies for the next generation product.
Yeah.
And at first, they thought, well, okay, we're going to go to radio waves, because that's what worked for Philco on these radio remotes. But because they travel through walls, these radio waves could inadvertently control a TV set in adjacent apartments or rooms, which is not going to help them scale this thing up.
Yeah.
So they came up with something called, love this name, of all the names, this is the best one, the Space Command.
Sure.
Why it's called Space Command, who knows?
It sounded very futuristic.
Yeah, right. But it does not do what it says on the tin, but does sound very futuristic. This was invented by Zenith engineer Robert Adler in 1956, and this was truly the breakthrough in TV remotes. It was the first truly practical and commercially successful wireless remote, and its technology became the industry standard for over 2 decades.
Yeah.
Instead of using light, like the inherently flawed Flash-Matic, the Space Command remote used ultrasonic sound waves to communicate with the TV. Their sound waves are at a frequency above the range of human hearing, so they didn't interfere with the TV's sound, and this is why we started to call it the clicker.
My grandparents had one on a beautiful cabinet television.
Like everyone's grandparents did.
It was absolutely this gorgeous piece of furniture
that you could also watch TV
that
on.
was the television, and you pointed this clicker at the thing and it made these different sounds.
Yeah.
It's hard to describe what was inside of it. It's almost like they were 4-pitched tuning forks that little hammers would hit.
Yeah, that's how it worked. It had there were 4 lightweight aluminum rods, each of a different length, and they were effectively tuning forks. So when you pressed a button, a small spring-loaded hammer would strike one of the rods, which would then vibrate and emit this unique high-frequency sound. Mm-hmm. That distinct click of the hammer striking the rod is where the name the clicker came from.
And the dog would go running from the house.
Just the poor animals. And some people, right? Some people have hearing in this range.
Yeah, sure.
So it drives them crazy. As legend has it, during testing at Zenith, there was one female lab assistant who would flinch every time the device was tested.
Oh, sure.
Due to her keen sense of hearing. She was about as lucky as all the dogs and cats in the rest of the world, just being abused by this thing. You had a microphone inside the television that would listen for these specific ultrasonic tones. Mm-hmm. One tone would be to turn the TV on and off, another would be to control the volume, channel up and down. It was a very novel solution.
We didn't have channel up and down. We only had channel up. We had a very early one, I'm sure.
You had the Space Command plus.
Yeah.
Novel solution, functional solution, but expensive because you had this elaborate receiver in the TV set that required 6 additional vacuum tubes.
Yes.
Just to pick up and process the audio signal.
Yes.
Just adding that remote control to the TV increased its price by about 30%.
But it worked, right?
But it worked. Technically, it worked great. It was not affected by sunlight, so you didn't have the problem of like when the sun would come up, your TV would turn on, or other ambient light sources. The sound waves could also travel around obstacles, so if your kid with their giant head was in front of the TV, you could still control it. You didn't have to point it directly at the TV. You could leave it on your lap. It wasn't perfect. Other high frequency sounds in the home, such as like jingling keys or coins.
Oh, yeah.
Even like your vacuum cleaner could sometimes accidentally trigger the TV functions.
You could drop things on the tile floor and cause the channel to change.
And I remember my grandmother had one of these, and she had this crazy, insane poodle that would bark. And when the dog would bark, every now and again, it would just get the right frequency and the TV would change channel or something. Drove my grandfather crazy. Commercially, it was a huge success. Space Command sold millions of units. The technology was later refined and evolved into solid-state circuitry, replacing the mechanical rods to generate those same ultrasonic signals. The approach was adopted by other manufacturers. It dominated the remote control market until the widespread adoption of infrared technology, but that wasn't until the 80s.
So they got a like 25-year run.
25 years. Yeah, they sold
That's not bad.
over 9 million of these things.
Yeah.
By today's standards, it doesn't sound like a huge number, but then that's a big number for the number of TVs certainly that were out there.
And the clicker led us to the infrared remotes.
Yeah. While ultrasonic was a significant improvement over the wired and light-based remotes, the Space Command and even its successors had some issues. In the 80s, you enter this sort of widespread adoption of infrared technology, mainly because LEDs got cheap.
Yeah.
Solid state is getting cheaper by the day, it seems. You ended up getting a lot more of the good with a lot less of the bad. And all the fundamental technologies for infrared communication, they had existed for some time previously. They just hadn't gotten that cheap. Yeah. Now they're pretty inexpensive. So the first television to use an IR remote was likely a product by the Canadian company ViewStar in 1980. Mm-hmm. And they came with a cable TV converter. The early IR remotes often had like a numeric keypad. And these were a significant departure from the simple 4-button clickers of the past. So they went like 2 to 4x the number of buttons on them from the previous Space Command.
But the 4-button clickers didn't require a battery.
Well, that's what's so cool, right? Like those things last forever. There were some stories of when they were designing the Space Command, Zenith was concerned, especially their sales guys were concerned that if they put batteries in the remote, people wouldn't know that when the batteries died, the remote was dead.
Well, no, they'd think the television connection died.
They were
yeah.
genuinely concerned about this. Because at the time, apparently batteries were only really used in flashlights.
And cars.
Well, yeah, but I mean of smaller size.
Okay, so what are some additional IR remote advantages?
Several. You get infrared lights invisible to the human eye, so you don't have to see it. Also, not going to drive cats and dogs crazy. They're not affected by ambient sounds. The digital nature of the IR signaling they put on there, the actual coding, allowed for much more complex coding, so you could get more functions.
Yeah.
You also don't have to worry about a stray light source or the sun turning it on because it wasn't emitting the right code to turn the TV on or off. So by the mid-1980s, IR remotes were just the new standard. Their basic design remained the most common form of remote control and used even until today. But the problem was that every device came with its own remote.
Yeah, I know about that problem.
You end up with like a remote per device. And these were some real first world problems that we all had to struggle through.
I end up with a closet full of remotes and I don't know what they do.
Yeah, I know. That's a big part of the problem.
I don't even know if I've gotten rid of those devices years ago and I still have the remote.
You're playing a little bit of like a digital consumer electronics archaeologist. And you're looking at it and you're like, what? Which version of the Sony receiver was this that I had? And you know if you throw it away, you're going to find the device that it goes to.
That's the one you
in
need.
your closet. Yeah, exactly. In that piece I think you referenced earlier from the Slate, the writer talked about how they felt that there was an excess of buttons. 92 of them. They counted 92 to be exact. They also went through and said, okay, I'm going to count every button I've ever pressed.
Yeah.
Not the ones that I press often, but the ones that I've ever pressed, period. And the number was 34.
Yeah.
So they had about 5 dozen extra buttons than
Unused
they needed.
buttons. Sure.
And I think that was pretty much everyone's experience. A third of the buttons, you didn't even know what they were because it had some
But if
abbreviation.
you needed those buttons, you needed those buttons.
Well, that was a big part of the problem. There was no other interface mechanism. So if you needed to do the weird picture-in-picture lower right quadrant and you didn't have that button on your remote, you were hosed.
Yeah.
There was no way you could do it.
So the fix for it is you need one remote to rule them all. You need the universal remote.
The rise of the universal remote. This was a response to this problem that you just described. Really late 80s, I think into sort of like the mid 90s, where you just had that remote control clutter. Every device had its own remote.
Yeah.
You had to turn them on in a sequence. It had to be in a certain order. You had your VCR, you had your cable box, you got a CD player, and it was a mess. I mean, it was really a mess. So any house, I think a typical house could have anywhere from 3, 4, even 10 remotes just for their home entertainment system.
Yeah.
And you had to like know the sequence. And I think for you and I, it was relatively easy because we're logical, we're programmers, we can think all the steps through.
We also did the installation.
So like you can go through and press all the buttons in the order. And I think it's really amusing to see people who aren't that. And they're like, what are you doing?
Sure.
In 1985, while far from the most advanced, Philips was credited with introducing the first universal remote under its Magnavox brand.
Yeah.
And it was the first device designed to control a range of different electronics within a single remote.
And didn't then Woz get pissed off at his remotes and try to jump into this game?
Apple co-founder Steve Wozniak. Love the guy. I've had the fortune of meeting him, spending time with him several times. He seems like he's always really, really early. He was personally frustrated by this remote clutter, left Apple to start a company called CL9, Control Line 9. This is like 1987. And his company released the Core, C-O-R-E, which is the controller of remote equipment, which was the first programmable universal remote. Had this unique learning function that allowed it to read and store the IR signals from a different remote, which is really cool. Technologically advanced, but complex, expensive, cumbersome to use. It was popular with nerds, with all the electronic enthusiasts, but not so much the average consumer. Because Woz, like that's just what Woz makes. As the demand for single solutions grew, other companies entered the market with a more user-friendly and affordable universal remotes. And the way they did it were by pre-programming them with a vast database of codes. They aggregated all of the codes, and that was less expensive, easier to use, less technically sexy for sure, but having to program in all the commands you wanted from another learning remote is an absolute pain, as opposed to just saying, you've got a Denon CD player, you put in code 0609, boom, it's out of a database, away you go. That code library approach then made for sort of an easy consumer experience, right? It's easy to set up, and then you only had to have one remote. You could go through maybe 3, 4, 5 different codes until you found the one that worked for your Sony, and away you went. It was typically brand specific. If you had a Sony, odds were the primary Sony code was going to work, unless you had some weird esoteric TV gray market from Japan.
Now, who mastered this technology when this technology was at its peak? Wasn't Logitech a huge part of this? The system could bridge the infrared and the radio and take the infrared signals by radio through walls.
I think you're talking about the Logitech like Harmony.
Yes. I mean, I have a house full of them.
That was one of the best products, I'd say, of consumer electronics of the past 40, 50 years.
Because none of my TV equipment is out in the open. It's all hidden in cabinets and things.
Yeah.
And if you have an infrared remote, they don't talk.
They leaned in hard on this. So this thing had infrared repeaters. It had a RF receiver. It had a very nice, at least early on, web setup. And then I think later they had like a phone app setup where you could program the whole thing. You just select your devices online. You'd say, I've got this Sony receiver and this LG TV and blah, blah, blah. You push a button.
And when I push Dodgers, turn on this amplifier and turn on this screen and
on
turn
this
on
channel.
all takes care of all the pieces for you.
It was pretty cool. I mean, a lot of people still use them. The ones I had, I loved. I mean, when I had, certainly before I had TVs that had the in-app experience on the TV, they were great. Yeah. They had some touchscreen versions that I was like not as great about because I don't like being able to have to look at things. I want to be able to just do it by feel.
Sure.
But the experience was still pretty compelling. My in-laws have one of the big Harmony touchscreens that they are just like keeping alive by you can't read any of the buttons. They're all worn off.
I had a bunch of those.
Everyone's afraid to touch it. You got to point it at just the right angle. Otherwise it doesn't work. There were Android phones for a while that had IR blasters on them, right? For a couple of years.
Yes. I think there still might be one.
Yeah, basically, but for a couple of years, like any Android phone you bought had an IR blaster on it with software. You could just control TVs.
Okay, so here we are in 2025. Dare I ask, how do you control your TV?
Well, I've spawned, so I've had children to do it. Not that they know how to do it. We don't watch television, right? Like anyone who listens to this show knows that my recommendation every week is typically not TV based. Yeah. So mine's rarely on. But with modern sets, especially with the inbox applications, I use very few secondary devices. Most of the TVs in my house, I think really only one TV in my house has a secondary device that we use even remotely often. Mm-hmm. Most of them, it's all integrated into the TV. So I use the OE remotes. And of the TVs I've bought in, let's say the past 5-6 years, those OE remotes, when I'm saying original equipment remotes, they have like 6 buttons on them. There's like a directional pad, like an OK, a back, and a home. And that's basically it. But what I think gets lost in the shuffle here a lot is HDMI CEC, which stands for Consumer Electronics Control.
That's what I use, because unlike you, I still have a stack of equipment that needs to be lit up to make the TV experience work. Yeah. Like you've got to make the amplifier work for the speakers. You've got to make the screen work. You've got to make some DirecTV tuning box work. You've got some internet connection thing that's got to work. And that takes care of that. I mean, the HDMI CEC is magic.
This is, this little subcarrier on the HDMI cable is what carries the video from like your DVD player to your TV or your receiver to your TV. And there's a little tiny subcarrier on there to control devices back and forth. So you can tell your receiver to switch inputs on your TV, or my Xbox can turn my TV on and off. It's really great. Most people don't even know how it works. They just sort of think of it as magic. My kids think it's a little monkey living inside the TV, which I just let them believe. But it's great. We sort of take that for granted because now you can get away in most cases with just having like the remote for one device that comes with it and not doing all this universal remote crap because it all works over CEC.
If you want to watch, I can't say it out loud. I'll say it out loud and I'll figure out how to make that not go off. If you want to watch the Game Show Network, you just say, I want to, and there it just switched.
Yep. What a great solution you've got, Jeff. You just, anytime anybody says Game Show Network, it just switches to Game Show Network.
It switches to whatever you tell it to switch to. But the funny thing is you can't use that phrase except if you want it to switch.
See if this works. Playboy Station.
We don't get that. I don't pay for that.
Well, okay. Youporn.com. Nope, nothing's working. Wind back for a second, right? We started with like remote control torpedoes, and then we end up with guys striking hammers against these little
tuning forks,
aluminum rods, right? They had to invent this stuff.
Yeah.
And I think it's pretty cool that at Zenith, these two co-inventors, so this was Dr. Robert Adler and Eugene Polly. This was for both the light-based and the ultrasonic-based remote controls. They received Zenith's Emmy from the National Academy of Television Arts and Sciences in 1997 for, quote, pioneering development of wireless remote controls for consumer television. Yeah. And I think that's pretty cool. Yeah. Unfortunately, both Polly and Adler are both deceased because they've been around for a very long time, but pretty cool bouts of engineering.
Very last thing they did at their funeral was click the remote and the lid came down on their casket.
Totally. And then somebody brought it back up. They just fought back and forth.
I just wanted to see it again.
Let's do it again. Who invited Adler's grandkids?
All right, we have to get out of here very quickly before we do. Have you seen or read anything good this last week?
Oh, yeah. This is another non-TV based recommendation for me. Do you know anything about the Excel obstacle course?
I do. I do.
You dork.
I was close to a woman who was excellent at this.
Yeah.
This is a keyboard thing, right?
Well, yeah.
Am I talking about the same thing you're talking about?
Yeah. In Excel. Yeah, no, you're aligned. There's a couple folks, one in particular, that have built this sort of collection of Excel documents that are intended to help you become more proficient at Excel shortcuts.
These aren't shortcuts you use every day. These are the most exotic, strange shortcuts.
As you get deeper in, yes, this is true. But there are some early shortcuts that most people don't know, like select row, select column.
Sure.
I'm getting way too excited. It runs you through these example sheets to try to help you build your muscle memory out on all these various Excel shortcuts. I consider myself an Excel grandmaster. I know most all of them, but I looked through it and I was like, ooh, that's one I didn't know. That's a new one.
Right, sure.
Which, by the way, does not work on Mac OS. And I'm like, well, I'm not getting Windows just to use that shortcut. Anyway, there's some videos floating around of folks doing this. One in particular of a guy, he's got this crazy like 4-way video where you can see the Excel sheet he's working on. You can see the keys that he's pressing. There's an ISO shot of his face. You have the instructions. I mean, it is like straight up ESPN, the Ocho for Excel.
It's good TV.
It's really interesting to me. Like I found myself watching the whole video tip to tail, and he just has this laser guided focus and he's doing a speed run through the Excel obstacle course. Then at the end, he's like, oh guys, it's 44 seconds. It's way too long. He just goes back and does it again. And I'm like, this is fantastic. I loved that. I loved the speed running of it. I thought it was lovely. I will put links in the show notes. Now I'm sure you're going to tell me you've seen something better, and I would like you to tell me what it is.
All of this talk about old-time TV technology brings to mind the 1982 film Mel Brooks produced that captures the chaotic, hilarious spirit of TV's golden age, My Favorite Year. Set in 1954, this semi-autobiographical comedy follows Benji, a young writer on a live television comedy show. His idol is the brilliant but volatile star King Kaiser. When the show books a larger-than-life, hard-partying Hollywood legend, it falls to Benji to keep the drunken Lothario sober for the live broadcast. Peter O'Toole delivers an unforgettable, Oscar-nominated performance as the swashbuckling star teetering on the edge of disaster. My Favorite Year is more than just a comedy. It's a love letter to the messy magic of live television. It shows that the most memorable year of your life might just be the one you spent babysitting a legend, as Mel Brooks actually did. In 1954, he was in fact tasked with keeping the notoriously hard-drinking and eccentric Hollywood star Errol Flynn on track for a guest appearance on Sid Caesar's Your Show of Shows. My Favorite Year on Amazon Prime now.
I had no idea that had roots in something that Mel actually did. That's incredible.
He was a writer on Your Show of Shows, and he had to babysit Errol Flynn.
I didn't know that. That's fantastic. I absolutely have to go back and watch this if I could only find my TV remote.
That is the episode.
Thank you for joining us for all this nonsense. It's really terrible podcast from our awful company. Visit us on the web at nonsense.productions. I'm Stu Little.
I'm Jeff Parker.
If you like this program, please follow, download, subscribe, and like at Apple Podcasts, YouTube Music, Amazon Music, AntennaPod, iHeartRadio, Spotify, my favorite Overcast, wherever you may get your podcasts from.
Nonsense Studios uses 7-Zip, a high-compression file archiver. Open source and completely free for personal and commercial use with no hidden fees or expiring trials. A simple interface lets you get things done fast and secure your data with its strong AES 256 encryption. Available on every modern and not-so-modern platform. 7Z, check it out.
You strike me as more of a tar GZ guy, to be honest.
I'm a 7Z guy, hardcore.
Are you
7Z.
really?
I really am.
Oh man, I still kind of default to tar GZ just because it's just baked into the ROM.
Because I'm using the AES 256 encryption all the time.
All the time?
All the time.
With like a different passphrase, or you have like the same passphrase? Don't tell me.
No,
I don't
different
know.
passwords.
You're a maniac. All right, I'll be here every Tuesday and Thursday mornings for more nonsense. Please join us.
Speaking of technology, have you seen the new autonomous Amazon Zoox cars?
No.
The front and the back are literally the same.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh man, I dated a girl like that once. Her name was Anna. The palindrome.